Imagine walking into any room and feeling the energy shift around you, not because you're trying, but because there's something undeniably magnetic about your presence. Most women think magnetism comes from perfection, the right look, words, and personality, but Friedrich Nietzsche understood something different. True magnetism isn't about addition, it's about subtraction, stripping away everything fake until only your raw, authentic power remains. The uncomfortable truth: you've been taught to dim your natural magnetism, to apologize for taking up space, to soften your edges, to make everyone comfortable while you disappear. But what if the very things you've been hiding are exactly what make you irresistible? What if your power isn't something you need to create, but something you need to stop suppressing? Nietzsche believed most people live as shadows of who they really are. But there are 6 daily habits that awaken something primal, something magnetic. Habits that transform you from invisible to unforgettable without trying. Have you ever wondered why some women command attention effortlessly, while others exhaust themselves seeking validation? Stay until the end. These aren't ordinary habits. They're ancient secrets disguised as simple daily practices. Every morning you wake up with a choice that most women never realize they have. You can either let the world sculpt you into what it thinks you should be, or you can pick up the chisel yourself and become the artist of your own existence. Nietzsche understood this when he spoke of self-overcoming, the daily process of creating yourself beyond what society, family, or past experiences have tried to make you. This is not about changing who you are, but about uncovering who you truly are beneath layers of expectations and conditioning. The woman who commits to this daily practice of self-creation becomes magnetic because she radiates the rare energy of someone who belongs completely to herself. There is something deeply attractive about a person who refuses to be a passive recipient of life and instead actively shapes her own reality. The magnetic woman starts each day with a simple but revolutionary question that Nietzsche would have loved. She asks herself not what others expect of her, but what she expects of herself in this single day that will never come again. This daily practice of conscious self-creation means examining your thoughts, your reactions, your choices with the curiosity of a scientist and the care of an artist. When you live this way, people sense that you are not following a script written by someone else, but creating your own story. They are drawn to this authenticity because it reminds them of what they have forgotten about themselves. Your commitment to becoming rather than simply being creates an energy field that others find irresistible. Most women spend their energy trying to fit into molds that were never meant for them, exhausting themselves in the process. But the woman who practices daily self-creation understands that she is both the marble and the sculptor, both the canvas and the painter. She takes responsibility for her own becoming, which Nietzsche called the highest form of human expression. This does not mean she becomes selfish or disconnected from others, but rather that she brings her fully realized self to every interaction. When you stop waiting for permission to be who you are and start actively creating yourself each day, you develop a presence that cannot be ignored or forgotten. The truly magnetic woman has learned the secret that Nietzsche spent his life teaching, that you are not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process of becoming. She understands that every small choice, every daily habit, every moment of self-reflection is part of the ongoing masterpiece of her life. This awareness transforms ordinary moments into acts of creation and ordinary days into opportunities for self-overcoming. People are magnetically drawn to her because she embodies possibility itself, the living proof that we are not prisoners of our past or victims of our circumstances. In her presence, others remember their own capacity for transformation and growth. There is a part of you that you hide from the world, a collection of thoughts, desires, and impulses that you have been taught to deny or suppress. Nietzsche would tell you that this shadow, this darker aspect of your nature, is not your enemy, but your untapped source of power and magnetism. The woman who learns to embrace her complete self, including the parts that society deems unacceptable, develops an authenticity that is both rare and irresistible. Most people spend enormous energy maintaining a perfect facade, but you can choose a different path. When you stop pretending to be flawless and start owning your complexity, you become magnetic in a way that perfection never could. There is something deeply attractive about a woman who is comfortable with her own darkness, because it signals that she is comfortable with yours too. The daily practice of shadow integration means acknowledging your jealousy, your anger, your selfishness, your desires without judgment or shame. Nietzsche understood that what we deny in ourselves does not disappear, but instead controls us from the unconscious, making us less authentic and therefore less attractive. When you can look at your own capacity for manipulation, your moments of pettiness, your struggles with envy, and accept them as part of your human experience, something magical happens. You stop radiating the desperate energy of someone trying to hide something and start emanating the confident energy of someone who has nothing to prove. People are drawn to this honesty because it gives them permission to be honest about themselves. Your willingness to be real in a world of pretense becomes a magnetic force. The woman who embraces her shadow does not become cruel or destructive, but rather becomes whole and therefore genuinely powerful. She understands that her anger can fuel her passion, her jealousy can reveal her desires, her selfishness can teach her about her needs and boundaries. This integration of light and dark creates a depth that superficial perfection can never match. When you stop trying to be good and start trying to be real, you develop a presence that is both compelling and trustworthy. People sense that you will not judge them for their own imperfections because you have made peace with your own. This creates a safety that allows for genuine intimacy and connection. Nietzsche spoke of the need to go beyond good and evil, to transcend the simple moral categories that keep us small and divided against ourselves. The magnetic woman has learned this lesson in her daily life by refusing to split herself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. She brings her whole self to every situation, not because she lacks boundaries or self-control, but because she has integrated all aspects of her nature into a coherent whole. This completeness is magnetic because it is rare in a world where most people are fragmented and at war with themselves. When you embrace your shadow and transform it into conscious power, you become irresistible, not despite your darkness, but because of your courage to make it conscious and useful. The most magnetic women understand a truth that Nietzsche spent years trying to explain, that real power is not about controlling others, but about mastering yourself. Your will to power is not a weapon to be used against people, but an inner force that creates the gravity around which others naturally orbit. When you develop genuine self-mastery, when you become the author of your own responses and the director of your own energy, you create an invisible magnetic field that draws people toward you. This is not manipulation or strategy, but the natural result of someone who has learned to lead her own life with intention and purpose. People are attracted to strength, but they are repelled by the need to dominate, and the difference between these two forces determines whether you become magnetic or merely controlling. The daily practice of will to power means taking responsibility for your emotional state, your reactions, your choices, without trying to manage or fix anyone else. Nietzsche understood that most people exhaust themselves trying to control external circumstances while remaining slaves to their internal chaos. The magnetic woman has reversed this equation. She controls what she can control herself and releases what she cannot control, everything else. This creates a stability and centeredness that others find deeply attractive because it represents the security they crave but have not yet developed within themselves. When you stop trying to change others and focus entirely on changing yourself, you paradoxically become someone that others want to change for. Your self-possession becomes a form of leadership that requires no followers because it naturally inspires them. Most women make the mistake of thinking that power in relationships means getting their way, having their needs met, or being chosen and prioritized by others. But true will to power in relationships means becoming so complete within yourself that you add value to every interaction without needing anything in return. This does not mean becoming a doormat or losing your standards, but rather becoming someone whose presence itself is a gift. When you master your own emotions, thoughts, and behaviors, you create space for others to feel safe, seen, and valued in your presence. This is the highest form of attraction because it addresses the deepest human need, the need to be accepted and appreciated for who we really are. Nietzsche taught that the will to power is ultimately about becoming who you are meant to be, not about imposing your will on others. The magnetic woman has internalized this wisdom by focusing all her energy on her own growth, healing, and development, while allowing others the freedom to do the same. She leads by example rather than by demand, influences through inspiration rather than manipulation. This approach to relationships creates a dynamic where people are drawn to her, not because they have to be, but because they want to be. Her will to power becomes an invitation rather than a demand, a possibility rather than a pressure. And this is what makes her truly irresistible to those who are ready for authentic connection. There is a particular kind of woman who can sit alone in a crowded room and somehow become the most interesting person there, not because she is performing or seeking attention, but because she is genuinely content in her own company. Nietzsche understood this paradox when he wrote about the necessity of solitude for anyone seeking to become truly themselves. The magnetic woman has learned to dance with her own solitude, to find in her own presence a companion so engaging that she never feels the desperate need for external validation or constant stimulation. This self-sufficiency creates an energy that is both mysterious and attractive because it suggests depth, inner resources, and the rare ability to generate her own happiness. People are drawn to those who seem complete within themselves because it promises that any connection with them will be chosen rather than needed. The daily practice of embracing solitude means creating regular moments where you are alone with yourself without distraction, without entertainment, without the constant noise that most people use to avoid their own thoughts and feelings. This is not about becoming antisocial or isolated, but about developing such a rich inner life that you bring abundance rather than emptiness to your relationships with others. When you can enjoy your own company, when you can find interest in your own thoughts, when you can be stimulated by your own imagination and curiosity, you develop a self-possession that is magnetic. Others sense that you are not available out of desperation, but out of choice, and this transforms the entire dynamic of how people approach and interact with you. Most women fear being alone because they have been conditioned to believe that their worth comes from being wanted, chosen, or needed by others. But the woman who has learned to dance with solitude discovers that her worth comes from within and cannot be diminished by external circumstances. She understands what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of the necessity of being comfortable with yourself before you can truly connect with anyone else. This does not mean she becomes cold or distant, but rather that she approaches relationships from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. When you are not running from yourself, when you are not afraid of your own company, you create space for genuine intimacy because you are not desperately grasping for connection to fill an internal void. The truly magnetic woman has discovered that solitude is not loneliness, but rather a form of communion with the deepest parts of herself that can only be accessed in silence and stillness. She uses these moments alone to dream, to create, to reflect, to grow, understanding that the quality of her relationship with herself determines the quality of all her other relationships. Nietzsche would say that she has learned to become her own best friend, her own most interesting companion, her own most trusted advisor. This self-sufficiency becomes magnetic because it signals to others that any time, attention or love she shares with them is a gift freely given rather than a need desperately fulfilled. And this transforms ordinary interactions into extraordinary connections. There is something deeply magnetic about a woman who refuses to accept things simply because that is how they have always been done, who looks at the world with fresh eyes and asks the questions that others are too comfortable or too afraid to ask. Nietzsche built his entire philosophy on the radical act of questioning everything, from moral systems to social conventions to the very foundations of what we call truth. The magnetic woman has adopted this same spirit of inquiry in her daily life, approaching conversations, situations, and even her own beliefs with genuine curiosity rather than automatic acceptance. This intellectual courage creates a fascinating presence because she brings depth and originality to interactions that others find predictable and mundane. People are drawn to her because she sees possibilities where others see only limitations, alternatives where others see only one way. The daily practice of questioning everything means developing the habit of asking why, what if, and how do we, no rather than simply accepting information, advice, or social expectations at face value. This does not mean becoming argumentative or contrarian, but rather cultivating the kind of intellectual humility that Nietzsche admired. The recognition that most of what we think we know is actually inherited assumption rather than examined truth. When you approach life with this spirit of genuine inquiry, you become someone who brings fresh perspective to every conversation and new insights to familiar problems. Your mind becomes a place where others want to explore because you make thinking itself an adventure rather than a chore. Most people are attracted to certainty and comfortable answers, but the truly magnetic woman understands that questions are more interesting than answers, that mystery is more compelling than explanation. She has learned what Nietzsche knew, that the willingness to live with uncertainty, to embrace the unknown, to question even your own most cherished beliefs, is what keeps life vibrant and relationships dynamic. This intellectual courage manifests in how she approaches everything from career decisions to relationship choices, always asking not just what feels safe or familiar, but what feels true and alive. Her refusal to settle for easy answers makes her a fascinating companion because she is always growing, always discovering, always becoming more than she was yesterday. The woman who has mastered the art of questioning everything becomes intellectually seductive because she makes others curious about themselves, their assumptions, their possibilities. She does not lecture or judge, but rather asks the kinds of questions that spark self-reflection and open new avenues of thought and feeling. Nietzsche would say that she has become a philosopher in the truest sense, not someone who has all the answers, but someone who asks better questions. This intellectual authenticity becomes magnetic because it invites others into a deeper level of engagement, where conversations become explorations and interactions become opportunities for mutual discovery and growth. The most magnetic women in history have been those who dared to live by their own moral compass rather than blindly following the rules handed down by family, society, or tradition. Nietzsche challenged us to go beyond good and evil, not to become amoral, but to develop our own ethical framework based on our deepest values and understanding rather than external authority. The woman who creates her own moral code becomes magnetic because she operates from a place of authentic conviction rather than borrowed beliefs, and people can sense this integrity even when they cannot articulate what makes her so compelling. She does not rebel for the sake of rebellion, but chooses her values consciously, deliberately, courageously. This moral independence creates a presence that is both trustworthy and unpredictable, reliable in character, but surprising in expression. The daily practice of creating your own moral code means regularly examining your choices, your reactions, your judgments to determine whether they align with your authentic values or merely reflect conditioning and expectation. This requires the courage to disappoint others when their expectations conflict with your truth, to stand alone when necessary, to choose what feels right over what feels easy or popular. Nietzsche understood that most people never develop genuine morality, but instead follow the herd, doing what others do without ever questioning why. The magnetic woman has broken free from this pattern by taking responsibility for her own ethical development, creating principles that serve love, growth, and authenticity rather than fear, control, and conformity. Living beyond good and evil does not mean abandoning all moral considerations, but rather transcending the simplistic categories that keep most people trapped in judgment and limitation. The woman who has developed her own moral code understands that right and wrong are often contextual, that what serves life in one situation may harm it in another, that genuine ethics require wisdom and discernment rather than rigid rules. This moral sophistication makes her magnetic because she brings nuance and depth to situations where others see only black and white. She can hold complexity without becoming confused, navigate gray areas without losing her center, make difficult decisions without torturing herself with doubt. The truly magnetic woman has learned what Nietzsche tried to teach, that authentic morality comes from within and serves the flourishing of life rather than the maintenance of order. She creates values that honor her own growth and the growth of others, that support genuine connection rather than social performance, that choose love over fear even when love is more challenging. This moral courage becomes magnetic because it gives others permission to question their own inherited beliefs and develop their own authentic relationship with right and wrong. Her example shows that it is possible to be both deeply ethical and completely free, both principled and flexible, both committed to truth and open to new understanding. Imagine that you had to live this exact day with all its choices, words, and moments over and over again for eternity. Nietzsche posed this thought experiment not as punishment, but as the ultimate test of how fully you are living, how consciously you are choosing, how authentically you are being yourself in each passing moment. The magnetic woman has internalized this concept of eternal return by approaching each day as if it were both the first and the last, bringing an intensity and presence to ordinary moments that transforms them into something extraordinary. She understands that magnetism is not about grand gestures or dramatic performances, but about the accumulated power of living each moment with full awareness and intention. When you treat your daily life as art, when you approach each choice as if it matters eternally, you develop a presence that others find irresistible. The daily practice of eternal return means asking yourself whether you would be willing to repeat not just the big moments, but the small ones. The way you spoke to the cashier, the attention you gave to your morning coffee, the care you put into choosing your clothes. This is not about perfectionism, but about presence, about bringing your full self to each experience rather than sleepwalking through your days, waiting for life to begin. Nietzsche understood that most people live as if they were rehearsing for some future performance, but the magnetic woman has learned to make each day the performance itself. She brings artistry to ordinary tasks, finds meaning in mundane moments, creates beauty in whatever circumstances she encounters. Living as if each day were eternal does not mean becoming obsessed with control or perfection, but rather about embracing what Nietzsche called amor fati, the love of fate, the ability to say yes to life exactly as it is, while simultaneously creating it exactly as you choose. The magnetic woman has learned to dance with this paradox, accepting what comes while actively shaping what she can. She treats setbacks as part of the composition, challenges as opportunities for growth, ordinary moments as chances to practice presence and awareness. This approach to daily life creates an intensity and aliveness that others find magnetic because it reminds them of their own capacity to transform routine into ritual, obligation into opportunity. The woman who lives each day as art understands what Nietzsche meant when he spoke of becoming who you are. That identity is not something you discover once, but something you create continuously through the accumulation of conscious choices and authentic actions. She approaches her daily habits, her relationships, her work, even her rest, as opportunities to express her deepest values and highest aspirations. This transforms her entire existence into a form of ongoing creation, where each day adds another brushstroke to the masterpiece of her life. People are magnetically drawn to this artistic approach to living because it shows them that ordinary life can be extraordinary when approached with consciousness, intention, and love. The most magnetic quality a woman can possess is not beauty, intelligence, or charm, but the courage to continuously become more herself with each passing day. Nietzsche's greatest insight was that we are not fixed beings, but dynamic processes of becoming, that our truest self is not something we find, but something we create through the daily practice of honest self-examination and authentic choice. The woman who commits to this ongoing revolution of self-discovery becomes magnetic because she embodies possibility itself, the living proof that we are not prisoners of our past or victims of our conditioning. She radiates the energy of someone who is actively authoring her own story rather than simply reading from a script written by others. This quality of constant becoming creates an irresistible attraction because it awakens in others their own dormant potential for transformation and growth. The daily practice of becoming who you are requires the courage to question not just external authorities, but your own internal assumptions about who you think you should be. This means regularly examining your automatic responses, your inherited beliefs, your unconscious patterns, to determine which serve your authentic self and which merely serve your conditioning. Nietzsche understood that most people spend their entire lives becoming better versions of who others want them to be, rather than discovering who they actually are beneath the layers of expectation and adaptation. The magnetic woman has reversed this process by making self-discovery her primary relationship, treating her own becoming as the most important project of her life, while remaining open to genuine connection with others who are engaged in the same heroic work. Becoming who you are is not a destination, but a daily practice of alignment, of choosing thoughts, words, and actions that reflect your deepest truth rather than your surface desires or social programming. This requires what Nietzsche called intellectual honesty, the willingness to see yourself clearly without harsh judgment or false flattery, to acknowledge both your light and your shadow with equal curiosity and acceptance. The magnetic woman has learned to befriend this process of self-discovery, to find excitement rather than fear in uncovering new aspects of herself, to treat personal growth as an adventure rather than a burden. This relationship with her own becoming creates a vitality and freshness that keeps people intrigued because she is always revealing new facets of herself while remaining fundamentally consistent in her core values and character. The woman who has mastered the art of becoming who she is understands that this is not a selfish or narcissistic pursuit, but rather the greatest gift she can give to the world. Nietzsche taught that when we become fully ourselves, we inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of authenticity and courage that transforms not just individual lives, but entire communities. She knows that her commitment to her own becoming gives others permission to embark on their own journey of self-discovery, that her courage to be real in a world of pretense becomes a beacon for those who are tired of living false lives. This is the ultimate magnetism, not the power to attract others to serve your needs, but the power to inspire others to discover and express their own authentic greatness. If these words stirred something within you, if you felt that spark of recognition or necessary discomfort, then you're ready for more. Subscribe and hit the notification bell because every week we explore philosophical insights that transform how you see yourself and your relationships. The magnetic woman isn't born, she's created daily through conscious choices and authentic courage. Join this community of women who stopped living on autopilot and started writing their own rules.